interesting places.
I'm sorry to interrupt like that. Now go.
Okay. All right. Back again.
Back.
Spring's always a good time to go to the granite outcrops. A lot of interesting things beginning to bloom and stuff this time of year. Hopefully the frost tonight won't do too much harm to any of that. But I'll kind of just get my presentation going here and we can get into it. And then I guess either at the end, if anybody has questions, we can take a few minutes for that, hopefully. And let's see, we'll share that. Do this, do that.
That's it.
So, got it? Looks good on this end, I
Looks
think.
good on this end.
All right. So, going to talk about our granite outcrop, Stone Mountain, probably the most famous one for sure. Most people in Georgia have probably been to Stone Mountain at least once in their life. Of course, the other two big granite outcrops are Arabia Mountain and Panola Mountain, and they're all within fairly close proximity of each other. And so uh, Stone Mountain is a state-owned one. So is Panola Mountain, actually. Panola Mountain is a state conservation park. And Arabia is more federal at this point with it. But Stone Mountain is owned by the state. It's a state park managed by an authority. And of course, it was the place of the Confederate Memorial, public recreation, protecting the natural resource. All of those things were in its founding mission there with this. So Stone Mountain of the three is the largest, obviously. It's one of the world's largest exposed pieces of granite. They argue over how old it is, but it's very old, millions of years. 300 million, they say, generally is one of the numbers pitched out. And of the three, Stone Mountain is the more pure granite of the three granite outcrops. And it's also one of Georgia's most important ecological and recreation sites. Stone Mountain is the most biologically diverse of the three. And although the other two have their, uh, high points too when it comes to the environment. So they're all very important and unique habitats that we have. The vernal pools like these here on top of Stone Mountain, the ones on Arabia Mountain, are critical habitat for certain species. We have, of course, Panola didn't really get hit with quarrying very much, but Arabia and Stone Mountain both certainly did. Although given its size, it's hard to tell today, a lot of the places where Stone Mountain was quarried, but you can see evidence. I don't know if you can see my little red rubber ball or not on the screen when I share or not, but you can see the scars left behind. And of course, parts of Arabia Mountain were basically quarried down to ground level. So much quarrying there. Uh, Stone Mountain, the granite was quarried for buildings in Atlanta, Washington, very prized type of granite. A lot of Arabia's was ended up as more gravel, different types of uh, stone that was used that way. And time, of course, has shown its impact, the erosion patterns on particularly Stone Mountain and Arabia Mountain, I find very interesting. In a way, I find the ones at Arabia more interesting because it has a more varied granite. The colors are more varied in it than Stone Mountain, which tends to be the much purer and whiter granite. And of course, the most famous way that Stone Mountain was impacted was the memorial carving that's on the north face of the mountain. Because of the uniqueness of these habitats, they have a very high species diversity. And as a photographer, this is what led me to them originally when I started. I was living right outside Stone Mountain Park when I first got into photography. And so this was really the area that was of most interest to me. Uh, there because you have different types of habitats. You have the mountain habitat itself, which is also literally, it's not big bare rock, it's covered with lichen, uh, at least where people don't walk on it quite as much. One of the ironies, Arabia actually gets more foot impact now than most of Stone Mountain does because of the changes in the way they were managed. But you have lakes at both Arabia and Stone Mountain near those as well, which is a different type, completely different habitat type than what you find on the mountain, of course. But none of these are natural lakes. They're all man-made lakes. You have forest and habitat. Stone Mountain Park has some of the remnants of old growth forest in the Atlanta area, particularly on the now north and south side of the mountain, would be older growth forest there. You have a lot of streams, especially at Stone Mountain. Some of these are temporary. Some of them are, run most of the time. Little Stone Mountain Creek and Stone Mountain Creek, which feed the Yellow River, both come out of Stone Mountain Park. That come into and then out of the lakes into Yellow River there, and you get a lot of this type of runoff at both places. Open fields, Stone Mountain with its songbird habitats and things, which is where we're going to meet for the hike at Stone Mountain. When we're doing it on Saturday, we're actually going to meet at that location. There, the flat rock outcrops, and you can see, I heard the diamorpha mentioned, you can see a little bit of the red moss along the edge in this particular photograph here from one of the flat rock outcrops. And Arabia has probably the largest areas of the more flat rock type outcrops, which is probably where we'll be there on Saturday morning, is on one of the flatter rock outcrops looking for diamorpha and things like that there with that. So this is an aerial view of Stone Mountain from 1955. You'll notice there are no lakes. There's nothing going on here. This is actually Memorial Drive. Then it goes right by. That's old Memorial Drive that went right by the front base of Stone Mountain. The carving is right here. This is kind of upside down directionally, and this photo north is south. So this is the north face of the mountain. Jump forward to 2010. There's your old Memorial Drive, what's left of it down here now, Highway 78 out here. And you see the lakes. And at Stone Mountain, most of the development is confined to this area in front of the park. Most of the forest and everything on the south side of the park are now protected, and most of the mountain itself are protected areas. Back in, everybody remember the Olympics in 1996, when all that was going on, I was actually working with a group called Friends of Stone Mountain Park and the Georgia Sierra Club. And we introduced legislation that got 65%. Everything that you see in the shaded areas here is protected areas at the park, off limits to new development in all of those areas. So you have the golf courses, the area that we were looking at in front of the carving, but all of the mountain, the south side of the mountain, all of this, and that's where you're going to find a lot of the trails that I'll mention. The songbird habitat where we'll be is down here in number 6 area, in this particular area with this. So granite outcrops have a lot of species that are basically endemic to them. The yellow daisy is probably the most famous one. Everybody who lives in the Atlanta area, I'm sure, has heard of the Yellow Daisy Festival every year, usually the first weekend after September when you have that. So going on, so the yellow daisy is one of the signature species that you'll find. Unfortunately, we will not find, well, we may find the little bitty plants where they're coming up this weekend, but if you want to photograph yellow daisies, that's going to be in September and October generally. A lot of these type species we may see depending on the weather. Sunny bells and sandwort, these are very small species, particularly in the spring. The granite outcrops, if you're into macro photography and nature, they're some of the best places you can go for this type of photography, those little tiny things that we find. Species like the dayflower also begin to show up in the spring. A couple of different species, and pretty much all of these are going to be consistent at Stone, Arabia, and Panola Mountains. All you'll find most of these species in any of those locations. Here's a close-up of the Diamorpha, the red moss stone crop. More commonly, everybody refers to it as the red moss that you see out. And this is what it looks like in its blooming stage. It has little four-petal white blossoms, probably a quarter of an inch across with those very small. So again, interesting. Trout lilies, which started blooming this week at Stone Mountain, which means they're probably still blooming in Arabia and well, definitely at Stone Mountain as well. So another one of the species common to those. It's a little bit different species than the trout lily that we see up here in North Georgia in the woods. They're related, but not the same. Species you might not expect to find around here, you find on the granite outcrops, like the prickly pear, which blooms a little bit later, but probably see those. The rock pink, it's a couple of different rock pinks. One's about the size of a dime and one's about the size of a quarter. And they tend to be a real challenge photographically because they grow on these tall, thin stems. And so just you breathing gets them moving around pretty well. So it'd be tough to photograph them today if the wind's blowing where you are like it is where I am today with that. A lot of common native species show up around the outcrops, of course, with the forest habitats and stuff. Spiderworts, a couple of different species of spiderworts you can find there. Trillium, a couple, particularly the nodding trillium, but there's usually two or three species of trillium you'll find in the woods. That's another spring species in particular. The dwarf irises, that's another one that comes up, should be coming up pretty soon now with those. Violets, of course, your full range of violets, yellow, purple, white, variegated, all of them you're likely to find as well. So you'll find tons of those. Species that are not a lot of times associated with some of these areas, you'll find like cardinal flower, particularly in marshy areas, both at Stone and Arabia Mountain near the lakes in certain areas. You may find cardinal flower. Unusual and rare species for the area, the blue curl in particular at Stone Mountain. Not sure this one's been identified at the other two locations, but some of these species are more common a little further north. These outcrops tend to be kind of right at the very tip of the Appalachian chain. So you do occasionally get some of these species that we associate with being a little further north a lot of times. Our native columbine, you'll find a few of those around as well. Species that are rare, like the glade windflower. This one grows on the high north slopes of Stone Mountain. And like the dayflower, it blooms for one day. It blooms and then it's gone. And then the next day, if you're lucky, some more bloom over a period of time. But the glade windflower, it's actually a state protected species on their watch list anyway for it. The rock aster, which is one of your rare asters, is common, less common than it used to be, but still fairly common at Stone Mountain. And I don't think it's been identified at the other two either. This is in the 1995 legislation I was talking about. This is one of only two flowers in Georgia protected by state law. The other one is the Cherokee rose, which is the state flower, which is not a native species to Georgia. The rock aster is, And during that legislation in 1995, the habitats for it were listed as protected areas in that particular legislation. Species like the pink lady slipper, yellow lady slippers, you do occasionally see them at the outcrops, a little bit rarer, but it is some things you could possibly see. The granite stone crop is the green version of the red moss. And this one is rare and it is a state protected species that grows at the mountain, up on Stone Mountain. And I think there's some of these at Arabia also. The Georgia aster, another rare species. This one is a candidate for listing on the Federal Endangered Species Act. It's currently being cultivated at Stone Mountain. They're propagating this species there, along with a few others there with that. The flat rock onion, that's another state protected plant, which there are some of these at Arabia Mountain, and some were transplanted to Stone Mountain from some outcrops in Rockdale County a few years ago. And so it's now found at Stone Mountain also. So the flat rock onion is a state protected species that's also been, Stone Mountain Park's had a very aggressive environmental program for the last 20 years or so. I mentioned that the mountain is not just bare rock. Uh, Between Stone Mountain, Arabia Mountain, and Panola, there's been close to 300 species of lichen identified. So the mountain, when you look at the mountain from a distance and it looks like a big bare rock, it's actually, for the most part, except where people hike and it's kind of worn down, most of the other areas are completely covered in lichens of some kind with those. Some of them, like this particular photo here, which you might be think you're looking at rock, but basically this is all lichen. Different lichen is on here, including the orange one here, and there's also a yellow one. That those are all lichens. So lichens are one of the more interesting species on the mountain. Stone Mountain and Arabia Mountain have two federally protected species of those, and actually Panola has this one as well with it. So this is called a pool sprite, and it grows in those vernal pools I showed you at the top of the mountain earlier at Stone Mountain. It's a very interesting little species. I think I do. Yes, I have a photo. From tip to tip, a leaf of this is about a half inch, maybe, from tip to tip, a leaf. And it grows in those vernal pools with a little rosette at the bottom and then a long stem that floats on top of the water. And then the bloom comes on top of the water. And with the weather we've had, it's possible we might see some of these at Arabia Mountain. We look in the right places with this. At Stone Mountain, a lot of these pools have been protected by a fence. This went up in 1996 also in conjunction with the Olympics to protect these areas. And all of the dots that you see after the fence went up, these species moved back into all of these pools that we find. And you close up here, you can kind of see how you fill up the pools with the pool sprite with those. The other one that grows in the same vernal pools, some of the same vernal pools, is called the black sport quillwort. This is one of the rarest plants in the world. There's only 5 known locations in the field, and the third largest population in the world of this species is probably the one in propagation at Stone Mountain these days. So that's another very aggressive program with reintroducing these once they've matured into pools again. And of course, you're going to find our dreaded invasive species at all 3 places. They have to be controlled. Arabia and Stone Mountain have had aggressive programs on some of the invasives. Some of these are interesting species: wisteria, parrot feather, honeysuckle, water primrose. If you're not familiar with it, If you think kudzu grows fast, get this stuff started somewhere. It can take over a place in a hurry. So for photographers, all of these offer many, many possibilities. I said in the spring, in particular, here's the Diamorpha again on the side of Stone Mountain, or maybe that's Arabia Mountain. It's one of them with that one. And you know, the fall is great. Stone Mountain is one of the best kept secrets for fall color around because the tree diversity is so high, and fall there can linger well into November at the park. And so it's a great place for reflections, fall color, be that. So when you're going out photographing these places, what do you want to bring with you? Well, one thing I said, sturdy shoes on here. Knee pads come in really handy. If you're working with anybody coming this weekend, might want to consider bringing a garden pad or knee pads if you want to get down on the ground with some of these smaller species. Can come in really handy. And then, of course, macro lenses would be very useful for that. Uh, Most of your lenses probably come in handy, but particularly macro lenses, things for close-up photography this time of year, in particular would be good. But a lot of wide angle stuff as well, more landscape type stuff also. So any of those things. So taking a look at the three different places and what's available for hiking, this is a trail map for Stone Mountain Park. Here, down at the bottom is the songbird habitat where we'll be meeting at the Stone Mountain on Saturday afternoon with it. There's close to 30 miles of parks, trails in Stone Mountain Park. The white trail that you see that goes around the mountain here is the Cherokee Trail. It is one of the oldest national recreation trails in the country. I believe it was the sixth one designated as a national recreation trail. Of course, you have the walk up trail to the top of the mountain. You have others on the island, around the lakes. There's other trails. There's the nature garden trails. So quite a lot. And each one has different things. The nature garden, native plants, streams, access to some of the mountain trails are through this area here, ties into the Cherokee Trail over here with this. The songbird habitat has both the open fields type of habitat, which is the lower loop, and then the forest loop, which goes up into the woods here on the hill behind there. So that's the songbird habitat. Muskogee Trail. When you come in the east gate, in between the two bridges, there's a parking lot on the right. This is the only dirt parking lot in Stone Mountain Park. And this is the Muskogee Trail. This again is going to be lake and forest type habitat. Great spot for fall color and reflections in the lakes. One of the better ones for that. And of course, the Indian Island trails, the Kings Trail, the covered bridge, all the way back up to the old grist mill and stuff. Fantastic area any time of the year, really, but particularly in the fall there. And so you're going to see everything from birds, butterflies, asters, scenic shots, sunset shots. Great, this on Venable Lake, a sunset shot there that faces sunsets. Get great reflections, wonderful area to shoot in there. The yellow daisies I mentioned, that's one of the great displays of wildflowers anywhere in Georgia, one of the better ones in the whole country, really, in a good year. Stone Mountain, Arabia Mountain, both can be very dramatic with the yellow daisies. Can be really mixed with the blazing star. Those two colors go wonderfully together when you find those areas. And they can just be complete, just rivers of them up and down the mountains uh, in the fall and in the woods as well. Even back on the woodland trail, some of those where you have outcrops, you'll have great yellow daisies. And the yellow daisies probably last longer at Stone Mountain because of the way the habitat is. They'll bloom up high, then they'll bloom down the south slopes, and eventually around to, like this trail is on the north side of the mountain. It'd be one of the later places where they usually bloom. View on the south side, they're just everywhere when you look. So it can really be incredible shots. Arabia is the same way. Arabia just has great yellow daisy displays. On Arabia, you have even bigger pools on the top than you have at Stone Mountain that by and large are undisturbed. And these pools, like Stone Mountain, you have both of those federal endangered species you'll find on those areas as well. You have very extensive trail systems at Arabia Mountain now. You have the two little lakes that are there, the Davis and Arabia Nature Centers, where we'll be meeting next Saturday morning. And we'll probably be hiking out on this side some to see what we can find over there. It has become, in recent years, since Arabia has been taken over as a more protected area, it can be tough uh, in terms of people on the weekends at Arabia. One of the ironies is you can get a lot more solitude at places at Stone Mountain now than you can Arabia Mountain because of the numbers of people and where you go. So on the weekends, it's Fridays are great times at Arabia, usually less crowds. Two major parking areas, the one at the south parking lot in Aware, one up at the Davis and Arabia, where we'll be meeting there for the Nature Center. And so all of it can be good. There's pathways that lead through the whole area, lots of trails. The path, the bicycle route that comes into that area as well, and extends all the way down to the monastery at Conyers, the Holy Spirit Monastery down there. Panola Mountain is the one that you really can't hike on, which is means that it's, if you want to see what a totally undisturbed granite outcrop looks like, Panola is the one where you can really see that. The outcrop trail, which goes by here, you're restricted from getting out on it, but you get to see really the diamorpha, the lichen, the mosses, how it really covers up the mountain. So Panola is a great experience as well. To go actually out onto Panola Mountain, they lead guided hikes. The state does, so you can arrange to go on one of those. And so that would be out this way up the mountain with those. So you have some opportunities there at Panola to go on some of those types trails, but very interesting place as well. All of these, as I said, are very important ecological sites because of their uniqueness, their diversity of species. Stone Mountain has the highest diversity, but they're all very diverse, very interesting, great places for photographers. It's really important, get on my environmental hat for a minute, it's really important to protect them as much as we can. Fortunately, they're all three public lands at this point. There's a lot of great outcrops that are in Rockdale and Gwinnett counties in particular, but they're very abused. A lot of this is glass that's in this here, broken glass. So they've been pretty abused. They get a lot of off-road stuff on a lot of these. So protecting the public lands ones is very important. And like anywhere else in the environment, as photographers, when we go out, we want to make sure that we are reminded to protect the habitat first and then take photographs with it. So prioritize the well-being of nature. You know, the more you know about these places and what you may encounter there, of course, then you can be more careful with endangered species and things like that. So then that. So that kind of gets me to the end here. I have been fortunate enough to do two books on Stone Mountain. One is a wildflower guide, and you can buy those from Amazon or me directly. I will bring some on Saturday at a greatly discounted price if anybody's interested. That can fill in information on a lot of these species. So I'll try to bring some of those on Saturday as well. Shameless self-promotion real quick and I'll get out of here. Some of my workshops coming up, you can go to my website, LarryWinslettPhotography.com, and sign up for a lot of them. I have two coming up later in the year, and one in northern New Mexico, October 13th through the 19th. Hopefully going to see a lot of fall color in the highlands that time of year. Should be very interesting. One of the great landscape destinations in the country, northern New Mexico. And then in December, I'm back in southern New Mexico for Bosque del Apache and White Sands National Parks. Bosque is one of the great, birding bucket list trips anywhere to go. Thousands and thousands of snow geese and sandhill cranes on that migration route. So anyway, I think that pretty much, well, if you guys are not familiar with Hunt's photo and video, I represent them. So any questions about equipment and stuff, we can see if we can help you out with that. So I think
Well,
that does.
Larry, thank you.
Yeah.
Have we got any questions? We got a good crowd here. We got several North Georgia members, and of course our Cosmo members are here. And I think our president actually showed up. So we're in good shape now. He's
Okay.
He's with us now.
Yeah. If anybody has any questions, yeah, absolutely. And if there are no questions, hopefully I'm going to see some of you on Saturday.
I think you will. I think you'll see several of us there Saturday.
Looking forward to it, Larry. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm looking